What's going on, everybody? Culturedog Sam Hatch back with another video, and I figured I better throw down just something briefly about my thoughts on The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, because my press embargo is finally up. Strange, it was already released in Europe, but over here in the States, those of us that were screened the film last week were forbidden from talking about it. But now that it's out and about, I can finally mention a few things about it. And the world won't implode or whatever. It was pretty much exactly like I expected. It is a very, I think it's a close relative to The Return of the King, in that there's obviously it being a battle of five armies. It's very battle heavy, battle centric, but with a lot of character pieces shot through the middle. If you're not a fan of Peter Jackson's tendencies to kind of, well, not even stray from the path or stray from the material, but to kind of invent things and just let loose like a kid in a CGI candy store, you're going to obviously be maybe distraught by some of the I guess you can even call it filler through portions of the film where there's these plot points that Tolkien has set up in the novel, but Peter Jackson invents these kind of intricate moments in between. But I was mentioning before in my Desolation of Smaug review of the Blu-ray that it's Peter Jackson's weakness is also his strength. And when you see the appendices of these films and you see that there is this scene that has been built in pre-visualization, it's easy for me to say, with everything within it. Like there's times where there's halls of Erebor, and then the dragon Smaug are already populated in this world, and then Peter Jackson can wear virtual reality goggles essentially and guide his camera through it, and you just see this giddiness in him when he's doing these things. And likewise, I'm sure he did the same thing during a lot of these battle scenes. And it's not just someone rides down a hill or someone runs up to find an orc. It's always this strange, almost like Rube Goldberg-esque chain of events that becomes kickstarted, and it always ties up, which is interesting too, because it's like, all right, where is this madness going to go? And it always kind of unravels, and then gets raveled back together again and tied up. So I do appreciate that aspect too. But there's this real tendency for Peter Jackson to just play in the sandbox, and really these films have and the kind of madness that he delves into is really the most purest kind of display of childhood play and imagination. It really is like a parallel to you as a kid running around with your other friends. You're like, oh, what if I did this? And oh, that slide is going to be this water flume, and we're going to do this with our action figures on it. It really is that writ large, writ expensive, which I'm sure people will take him to task for. How dare you, have childlike fun and wonderment, but it being a multi-million-dollar project. But yeah, you really should be applauded for that. The fact that he's just kind of digging deep into the I don't know, like the least cynical, the least muddied aspects of it, just like wonderment, adventure, and just running with it. As I mentioned before, he always usually bites off a little more than he can chew sometimes with some of what he wants to do through CGI versus what he can accomplish in the Fellowship of the Ring. There were some of the scenes in the Mines of Moria where the camera was traveling so much, it was hard to kind of, like, you had to actually actively think about where the characters were and piece them together with the scene to make it work. And likewise in King Kong, his remake, there was an overhead shot as characters were leaping over chasms and gaps in this path as dinosaurs were stampeding. It just didn't quite work. And in this one, the scene that's farthest most out on the edge, and the last one, it was probably jumping on the heads of barrel riding dwarves. This time there's a scene with Legolas where he's running up a bridge that is at the same time disintegrating, and eventually it becomes a very anime-esque scene where he's stepping from free-floating bricks from one to the other as the bridge is falling apart, and you really have to take that with a whole like shaker of salt. But the other things that people want to complain about, I didn't really find that objectionable. Tariel is a fanboy nightmare. I mean, I understand she was injected into the plot as kind of another way for Peter Jackson to expound on the dwarf elf, if not love, but kind of fascination between Gimli and Galadriel and the Fellowship of the Ring. But I don't know. And this time they have actual dwarf, and Aidan Turner is besotted with Toriel, and everyone's worried that they're going to have this, I guess, sex scene or something to that effect. But it's handled very, I don't know, it's very charming, and it's handled with great care, and nobody's treading upon the legacy of Tolkien. And that said, there's a lot of slavish devotion to the parts that matter. And it's weird reading Tolkien. I mean, he's very, very descriptive in certain regards, and in some other regards, not so much. Like other things that you would think would be explained or just kind of glossed over, or it's kind of mildly mentioned, and it's rather odd that the geography of the side of a mountain is described to a T, but some of the grander concepts are just kind of thrown out there. So if you're going to adapt this stuff, there really is going to have to be some expounding on these kind of gaps, and fill in some of the battles and some of the kind of groundwork of what's going on with all these characters, the elves versus the dwarves versus the orcs, and you have to build some scenes that aren't necessarily in the text. So the film carries off exactly where the Desolation of Smaug left off. If you haven't seen that, then you won't know that it has a dragon named Smaug who is approaching vengefully the town of Lake Town. And this film is clearly not focused on Smaug. It's called The Battle of the Five Armies. So Smaug is not a large portion of the running time. So some people may be disappointed that it's not this huge action. Well, there's plenty of action, but it's not this huge hour-long set piece that's going to unfurl. But that said, there's a lot of great scenery, harkening back to some of the amazing, Vermithrax, some of the amazing aerial moments from Dragon Slayer. Great film if you haven't seen it, by the way, check it out. So there's that, and Bard the Bowman you get to feel a little bit more for him as a character this time. And there's a lot of comedy hijinks involving the mayor's crony, his very Wormtongue-esque assistant, and him kind of sucking up to all these survivors of an attack on Lake Town. And then it quickly sets up the, instead of oil, there's gold in the mountain, and if you have some sort of riches or wealth, a lot of people are going to want it. So it sets up that scenario, and in the middle of it injects a dragon sickness laden king of the mountain. So that makes it rather character driven. So you have Bilbo, who's possibly done a bad thing in order to help a friend. And I like all the kind of shadings of Bilbo. I mean, he has this ring of power that he is reluctant to let people know about and discuss. But then on the other hand, he does thieve things for the greater good. So I like all those different kind of colorings of Bilbo, the character. But yeah, he's trying to save Thorin Oakenshield from going madder. And as he's looking for the Arkenstone, which will allow him to lead gloriously as king under the mountain, he can't find it, and he begins to suspect that one of his dwarven company members may have lifted it. While this is going on, the outside world is looking for shelter and or talks and possibly a share of the wealth, and has been posited that a mound of gold like this will drive its owner mad, and so he quickly Thorin walls up the entrance to the cave system and decides to make a stand. So there's, from that point on, there's a lot of action that needs to be taken care of, and it certainly is. It's funny. One of the complaints I heard on my way out was another goer was like, "This is a children's story. And there's so much battle. There's so much death. And if you read the text, it's there. It's weird. I mean, I remember thinking back on it after it had been a few years since I read the Hobbit. That I was like, the first part is the adventure to the mountain to deal with the dragon. Then there's the whole situation with the dragon. But then it turns into Saving Private Ryan with dwarves for quite some time, and there's death, and there's main characters die. That's all in the book, and it's always been a weird fit. It's supposed to be this adventure, this kind of light-hearted romp that Bilbo's going on, but then it is almost as heavy as the events of Return of the King. That there's this toll and this weight that people are dying. That Gandalf may have bitten off more than he can chew by sending these characters on this quest. So there is a heaviness there, and it's always been there. It's been there in the book, so if it's in the film, it's not the fault of Peter Jackson. It was also cool seeing some of the more behind-the-scenes doings of Galadriel and Saruman and Radagast and hanging out, battling the Necromancer and revealing Sauron and all that stuff. So that was cool. I love that they injected a lot of the appendices from Return of the King into the film. I know people take them to task for it. Again, people just love to complain. I've read recently there was a meme about how it only takes you 5.5 hours to read The Hobbit, but it'll take you 12 hours to watch the film or something to that effect, or watch the whole series. And then someone pointed out that the audiobook is at least 11 point something hours. So, but it's weird though. It's not done without skill. It's not done without delightful characters that you may want to enjoy hanging around with. So it's really like, I don't know, it just feels akin to complaining, there's a giant plate of chocolate chip cookies, and I really like chocolate chip cookies, but there's 40. Last year I had 30 chocolate chip cookies. Why is there 40 chocolate chip cookies? I'm going to eat them. Man, I hate getting what I want, and I hate loving it. I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of that with The Hobbit. Ooh, I'm going to have to hang out with these dwarves and live in this rich fantasy world for a couple hours. Wow, that sucks. I mean, I don't get it. I don't see it. So I guess I'm just not cynically driven enough. I'm gonna lose my street cred. But I thought the Battle of the Five Armies was just what I was expecting. It was very Return of the King-esque. It was heavy, and indeed, there's some over-the-top CGI sequences. Did they go too far? I'll let you be the judge. But I didn't again see it in any high definition. I didn't see it like 45 or 48 frames per second or anything like that. I didn't even get screened in IMAX. So I'm actually going to go back and see it on Monday to see it in IMAX to do a comparison contrast and check that out. But I did see a digital presentation, at least in 3D. The 3D is negligible, just like it has been, I think, really the whole series. Especially I haven't watched the Blu-ray again. 3D is just, I don't know, it's just not really impressive, I don't feel, and you forget about it almost instantaneously. I don't feel like it enhances the storytelling in any way. I don't know. I just don't see it. I don't feel like if I'm watching a 2D print of a film and a 3D print that there's really something extra to the 3D. It either works or it doesn't. So yeah, The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies. If you have despised the films to this point, obviously don't go bother checking it out. But I mean, if you are a fan of the series, it's a no-brainer. I thought the wrap-up at the end was also very well handled. No, people won't be complaining about the 3 endings or the 4 endings of Return of the King. I think they towed that line as to how you say goodbye to certain characters and how you kind of come down off the high of the battle naturally. And then not shortchange people. So I really like how it wound down. I'm wondering to see what could possibly be in the extended edition. I'm sure there's plenty of things, but it really seems pretty comprehensive. And some can even accuse it of having some filler, especially in the battle scenes. But yeah, you get to see Billy Connolly do a lot of headbutting and strange stuff as a dwarf coming to the aid of Thorin. Really, really strange stuff. But yeah. Out of the Five Armies. I'm sure you've seen it already. You probably saw it last night, but I had to throw down a couple cents on it. Hope you had a good time, and we'll see you back here for some more Laserdisc talk very shortly. Thanks.